Turning to Ukraine, where the country is weighing its response to a new peace plan put forward by the U.S. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already backed the deal, which includes many of his longstanding demands, including large territorial concessions, reducing the size of Ukraine's army, and barring it from NATO. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has not rejected the plan outright, but said his country faces an impossible choice between losing its dignity or losing a key partner. The U.S. is pushing for Ukraine to respond by Thanksgiving this coming Thursday. Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent Gulliver Cragg in Kyiv. He gave us some insight into the Ukrainian president's strategy.
Pretty much spelled out the most important part of it, I think, in that video address that he made, in saying that Ukraine absolutely must not allow itself to be accused of being the party that refused diplomacy or that doesn't want peace or that's an obstacle to peace. And that's why he is saying that Ukraine is willing to talk about this and saying as though it looks as though he was considering the plan. And I think that that's probably part of the diplomatic stance that he's taking rather than a willingness to actually sign up to this plan, which would mean Ukraine losing much more than just its dignity, actually, but a large swathe of territory. That's one thing. But more importantly than that, quite a lot of its sovereignty, quite a lot of its rights in terms of what alliances it wants to join, what policies it has to have inside the country, and the size of its armed forces. These are things that are really going to be red lines for Ukrainians. But Zelensky said in that address that they're not making any loud statements. He means we're not going to start shouting out that our red lines are this or that we're outraged about this or that. His position is to take a very, very diplomatic stance. And I think this is in the hope that the plan is actually much more flexible and less set in stone than it's being made out to be at this stage, as more details emerged of how that plan was worked out and the role played by the incompetence of the Donald Trump administration and Steve Witkoff, and basically misunderstandings, leading the US administration to lead to what almost an about turn in terms of its policy on Ukraine. Because recently Donald Trump was talking about how he was so disappointed in Vladimir Putin, how he thought Ukraine did possibly have the military potential to take back the territory occupied by Russia. And it seems as though the Americans were almost tricked in a way into presenting this plan. But now they've rallied around it with J.D. Vance, the vice president, again, really speaking out against those, particularly in Europe, who've been condemning this plan. So Zelensky knows now is not the time to condemn the plan. Now is the time to say we want to be diplomatic and then try very hard to get the Americans to change tack again. And at the same time, an important part of his strategy has clearly been to say that this is a very, very serious time in order to stop people going on about the corruption scandal that erupted last week and demanding political changes.